Who here has done any kind of creative finance deal? Any good experience on that? What's the biggest deal in the room that we've closed on creative finance? Anybody got anything? Well, why do you guys raise your hand on the creative finance side? What's the biggest creative finance deal closed? $500,000. That's awesome. Anybody else? No? Okay. Was an oil and gas project manager for about 10 years. Traveled all over the world doing that. 40 states, 9 countries. Made a ton of money in oil and gas. Was paying way too much in taxes. My CPA's like, hey, you gotta quit paying all these taxes. So that's what got me into real estate. Like a lot of people, I didn't know anything about what I was doing there. Self-taught, and then a lot of great resources out there. Bigger pockets. Great shout out to those guys, and excellent people like you guys that are doing the thing. So the largest creative finance deal that I've done in a single acquisition, and this was SFR space, single family rental space, $2.5 million on the hood of a truck in Menards parking lot. All right, so that's the cool thing about creative finance. Creative finance.
Save big money at Menards.
Right, saving big money at Menards. Creative finance space is whatever you want to make it, and that's the nice thing about creative finance. And the nice part about the market that we're moving into right now is that there are a lot of loans that are maturing, and a lot more. It makes the creative finance space a lot easier for all of us. Because I'm guessing a lot of guys. Is there anybody in here that's just doing single family rental space? Lots of people. Anybody that's focused on multifamily? Okay, got a few multifamilies in here. Anybody that's focused on self-storage? Self-storage, okay. Office, retail, office maybe not so much. There's not too many office people in the world right now. All of these things are possible through creative finance. So I put together a little bit of literature for you. It's not super in depth, but I think the handouts are on every table. So we can kind of skip through some of this stuff, but we'll kind of get into the meat and the potatoes of this thing so we can kind of keep time down to so owner finance is probably my biggest strategy. I've done about $35 million in owner finance alone on the SFR and small multifamily space. When I talk about small multifamily, I'm talking about 24 units or under. All right, $30 million. Who you would talk to on an owner finance?
The owner,
What kind of owner?
basically distressed, some issues.
So where I found most of these deals, I'll go, however you find your people, whether it's skip trace, whether it's GIS, whether it's, mailers or whatever the case is. You've got this target audience of somebody that's 50, 60, 75 years old. They've owned these properties for 20, 30, 40 years. They've probably depreciated them completely out. And these people are really good to target. They've got portfolios, small portfolios of 10 to 50 properties. You can go to these folks and you can say, hey, I want to purchase this portfolio from you, and here's kind of where I would like to buy this portfolio at. And then you can start working on terms. And it is literally as simple as that. On the owner finance side, you're looking for, old, tired, wore out owners. That sounds terrible, but that's what you're looking for. The guys that are, maybe bad operators. Why are they selling? Why would they want to sell? Other than just being old and tired, why else would they want to sell? Anybody?
Avoid taxes.
Well, that may be a strategy for the reason for the owner finance part.
Bigger.
Most likely not with this crowd of people, but it could be, but in my experience, no.
Get out of managing it.
They're tired. They're ready to get out of managing. They don't want a taxed event, and that's where you can get the terms that you want. So you can get super long term, super great financing terms. Most of these properties don't have a loan on them. These guys have owned them forever. They probably bought them cash on the courthouse steps a lot of times. I'm seeing a lot of that, especially in the farmer world. They bought it because their CPA said, hey, you need a tax deduction. You should buy a piece of real estate. They did that, and the rents are super low too, by the way. You'll find these properties, the rents will be $250 to $500. And you can go in there and put a little bit of money in and raise the rents to $700-800 a lot. So it's kind of the second thing is there, another creative finance strategy that you can use is called a lease option. Has anybody ever heard of a lease option?
Yeah.
So, lease option is pretty popular in that space too. And these are all creative finance strategies that you can use together. And we'll kind of go over some deals as we go through some of these and talk about how we might structure one of these deals. A lease option is essentially, the guy doesn't want to sell today, or maybe he does want to sell today, or maybe he doesn't want to sell this calendar year. He wants to sell next calendar year. Lots of options there as to why he might want to do a lease option. You can put a lease on that place with an option to purchase later on in the future for a designated price. So I've done this several times. One really good example of this, Lake of the Ozarks market was kind of stagnant for a long time. Anybody familiar with Lake of the Ozarks area? So super stagnant for a long time. Land per acre was about 800 to 1,000, 1,500 an acre for a while. And a lot of properties sat there forever. And I started to see the market starting to trend up a little bit. I've got a brokerage as well, so we track that pretty close. I'm like, okay, the market's trending up a little bit, so I went and put some of these places on lease option. Negotiated the sale price as of today with a lease option 12 to 24 months in advance. We bought some places that we closed one for $400,000, lease option, 12 months in the future. And when we closed it, it reappraised for $640,000. We paid $400,000. This is a lease option executed the correct way. Doesn't always happen that way, but that's a good example of what can happen. Subject to, lots of people know Pace Morby, right? Pace Morby's, by far the leading expert in sub-2 deals. Sub-2 is a lot like owner finance. Really the owner finance side, maybe they're not in a position that they're hurting, but typically sub-2 deals they've got some trouble, they've got some turmoil, whether that be tax issues, or whether that be their payments in arrears, or whatever the case is. You can come in, you can sub-2 that deal. You're essentially assuming the loan without the bank knowing that you're assuming the loan, which does also happen in owner finance cases sometimes. Would there be any recourse on some of this stuff?
Bank calls the note.
Bank calls the note. So that's a real thing, right? The bank could call the note. What do you do if the bank calls the note? So yeah, you could turn it into a lease. You could just restructure the deal, right? You could turn it into a lease option. You could kind of renegotiate the terms. You could also do what else? Probably the best option in this case is what? Well, if you're trying to buy and hold, maybe not.
Assume the loan.
Refinance?
You might be able to refinance, you might be able to assume the loan. Probably the best thing to do, and most people don't do this, but call the underwriting department at the bank and find out why the heck they're calling the note. Be like, hey man, we caught the note up, we switched the insurance, everything's taken care of. You guys are made whole right now. We're making the payments. What's the deal? The banker may not know, but the underwriter's gonna know. And a lot of times, if you can get a hold of that underwriter, you can solve a problem more times than not. And then if you can't, now you can look at a secondary method, either refinancing the deal or changing it into a lease option or some other form of creative financing. And there are a bunch of different strategies in between owner finance, lease option, sub-2. Owner carry. There's a million names. Anybody else got anything else out there on the creative finance side? Any other term? There's a ton. There's got to be some in the room. Come on, man.
Come on, Jacob.
Jacob,
Rose,
yes. What other things are going on?
Wrap mortgages, innovation.
Oh, yes.
We're gonna let this guy talk about wraps and novations for just a second. You tell us all about it, man. I've never executed a wrap or novation. I've done $80 million in real estate transaction. I've never, ever done a wrap nor a novation ever. Tons of creative finance, in the terms of owner finance, lease option, sub-2.
No, I'll do the wraps just briefly, and then I'm going to actually pass it to Samson for the novation, because Samson came to me and suggested a novation for a property we have. I'm still learning. I'm learning from Samson. So wraps, all it is you get a mortgage. One way is like we've bought on sub-2. You buy somebody's mortgage or you take over somebody's mortgage at 2%. And what we're doing is we're doing the term we do, you can give them title. We do a contract for deed. All that means is we're staying on title, so there's not going to be any due on sale clause. And you give somebody else a mortgage, they're going to pay you 8% interest.
What's a contract for deed?
Yeah, sorry, I this is very technical, boring stuff for some people. Yeah, very valuable. So you stay on title until they pay off the loan to you. So I'm gonna go buy a property, 2% loan, took it over, and then I'm gonna sell the property to someone else, and they're gonna pay me 8%. So I'm collecting that 6% difference. I'm probably gonna sell it at a higher price to them than what I bought it for, and I'm on title. So the bank who owns the 2% mortgage isn't gonna call the note due because I'm still on title, and there wasn't this exchange.
Right.
No title transfer.
Yeah. No. So that is wraps. Simple. I'm learning how to explain it better. Hopefully that made sense for a lot of you. I'll let Samson talk about novation.
And just so you guys know, there are a couple different things that happened in there, right? So, when we talked about a CFD or a contract for deed, that's typically what's going to happen in that owner finance space too. Seller carry, CFD, owner finance. There's a ton of different names that people call it, but all relatively the same thing. Go ahead on that novation part, Samson.
So the reason that Jacob's giving me this microphone is because last weekend I came up to him and I said, "Hey Jacob, what do you have that's been sitting around a while you can't dispo?" And he told me about this house that they're all in for about $163K. I know the ARV is about $240, so I can put my construction company in while they still have possession of the house, get my construction company all front the construction costs to get that house up to ARV, and then we'll split the difference between their holding costs and the ARV, whatever agreement we can come with on that deal. So novation is just a creative way. Say you've got a seller, you found a seller that wants X amount of dollars, the market's telling them they just can't get that X amount of dollars. A novation is a way for you to step in, provide value to that seller by fixing their house up, coming out of your pocket the construction costs, and then you split the overhead, whatever the difference is between what that seller wants and what the house can fetch when it's all fixed up. The novation agreement gives you equitable interest in the property, and you can lien on the property. So worst case scenario is the property doesn't sell. You also have to be really careful about the underlying terms of the property too. So like in Jacob and I's case, they own that property out with cash. I'm not too concerned about that being called in foreclosure. I know that he's not like behind on his payments, so no, not a huge risk for me, right? But say somebody was in like a 12-month term loan and a hard money loan or something like that, and they're on month 10, that would be a really risky loan, and I wouldn't necessarily do a novation.
Sometimes I've heard people doing like a limited power of attorney, so you have like
Go for it.
All right, cool. So and as you guys look at this creative finance strategies, there are so many different creative finance strategies that you can use. And the good thing about them is, just listen to Samson, to talk about the novation and him talk about the wrap. And, I think about like some of the deals that I've done in my head. And a lot of these, strategies, although we didn't call them this, like, these are things that you have to navigate through, and it's like you're talking with the seller, you're talking with, as whoever you're dealing with. As a group, you're talking back and forth, and you're figuring this thing out. So sometimes that stuff has to happen, but I guess that's the legal name for the document is a novation. So I appreciate that. I learned something tonight. So told you should have spoke. You're the man. So, no.
When you just, I didn't know that was what it was called, but I know it's about in here, but HGTV, they have a show called Celebrate. And so they have agents, women who buy the homes, they, have that. But on HGTV it's called Unsellable, so you can watch the show and they do this similar thing where they partner with the owners, they renovate the home, they take on the cost, and they split that profit once it's sold.
Yeah, so I've done that a bunch. I always called it JV, honestly. Is what I called it. So, me and you go in to do a deal together, and one of us brings the capital, one of us brings the deal. We go in and do the deal, and then we split some stuff out in the end. Whatever that partnership kind of looks like. And million other terms in there, but that was a super short, brief description of that. And then kind of the last of them is syndication, and there's probably a million that I didn't hit, but syndication is another form of creative finance. whereas you can buy, you have a sponsor or a syndicator, usually a GP team. This team is typically, relatively experienced in the area. You do have to vet your sponsors. You should always do that very thoroughly. But if you've got a little bit of money, and then this guy's got a little bit of money, and this guy has a little bit of money, you all go together and you buy a bigger asset than what you could have bought in the first place. So that's kind of creative finance. Now, each one of these has a ton of different cons and pros to them, and the owner finance strategy side has a ton of pros and a ton of cons. These are deals that you can typically do with low and no money down. The lease option, you can also do that with low and no money down until you go to execute. The sub 2, sometimes you can do that with low and no money down, depending on the position of the owner. Syndication, not so much. Like, you're not going to go into a syndication with no money. It's not that creative. It's kind of the other side where it's like, okay, I've got some capital, but I don't know how to do the thing. So I'm going to put some capital with a GP team that's going to take care of that thing. But, the pro there is that it's way more passive. The other ones are way more hands-on. So, it really depends on where you're at and what you want to do and what your strategies are as to which, one you use, and also the market in which one you use, because they don't all work at the same times all the time. Would anybody disagree with that? No.
Depends on the market.
Just depends on the market. Every real estate deal depends on the market. So we'll kind of talk through some of these owner finance deals, because that's really my strongest suit, is how I would typically structure an owner finance deal. And maybe we could just pass the mic around and get some questions on that, so we can kind of go into more depth, because I want to make sure that we keep to a fair timeline. We're not 4 hours in here.
Sure.
So, okay.
Could you give us an example of one of the deals that you've done?
Sure.
That maybe someone could come across?
Sure, yeah. So I found a guy that was wore out and ready to get out of the space. And initially, I was just buying one-off deals, on market or even off market. And I would go in, fix them up, and then I'd flip some, and then buy a rental and a flip again, and then kind of build my portfolio that way. I had one goal. My goal was to get to $10,000 a month in passive income, or what I consider passive income, but it's really not passive, right? So I could quit my oil and gas job, or so if something ever happened, I could quit that job. In that process, I was trying to find a property manager, right? And that's how I kind of stumbled upon this creative finance thing, just so everybody's really aware of that. So I was interviewing different property managers. What does this property manager look like? And I had this huge list of questions. Everything from acquisition to disposition, which is not what a property manager does. But they're going to manage your property. They're going to do the thing, maybe well, maybe not. So I've got all these questions. I meet this guy, and this guy's like, "Man, you're going to buy my portfolio." I'm like, I didn't come here to buy a portfolio. But then I started studying up on what he was talking about and trying to figure that out. And turns out this guy had a lot of properties that he owned and that he had under management. So after having a couple different meetings with this guy, I figured out like he had no exit strategy. And through talking with me, he realized he had no exit strategy. Real true exit strategy. He was looking for an exit strategy. He just didn't know what it was yet. So whenever we do a deal, we always plan exit first. That's step number one, is plan exit first. All right, so know how you're going to exit that deal. There's a varying age in this room, right? We're all different ages. We all have different life cycles. We all have different things that we want to do. And if you're my son's in the room. He's right here. Trevin's 16 years old, right? And if you're 16 years old and you're starting this thing, or you're 60 years old starting this thing, your life cycle is a little bit different, right? So plan that exit. Know how long you're going to keep the property. So we plan on a 3, 5, 7 year disposition, or refinance, or whatever we're going to do with the property. So whenever we found this particular portfolio of properties, we kind of tested the waters at first. We bought 15 deals, all vacant properties. Terrible mistake. You should not do this. So we bought 15 vacant properties, and then after rehabbing and flipping a couple of them and making some of our capital back, we went back for a second round and bought 15 more empty properties.
Yeah.
The first year we spent $500,000 in liquid cash getting properties turned around, and literally every late night from, Trevor, what's the latest you've ever been on a project?
5:30, it was ridiculous.
5:30 a.m. So working all day, working all through the night, and then working into the next day, trying to get these properties up and rented because we had payments that were coming up and coming due. So, has anybody ever done that? Oh yeah. All right. Has anybody ever been as stupid as I was and buy 30 empty properties? No. You should not do that, right? But the thing was, I was buying these properties so ridiculously cheap because they were vacant. It was in the wintertime, very hard to lease in the wintertime, and this, was a strategy that really works, and it really does work. If you're looking for that sort of property, whether it's, a $30,000 property or a $15,000 property or $100,000 property, whatever your market is, know the time to buy that property. December is a great time, by the way, to buy vacant properties. Nobody wants them. December, January, February. Samson, how many deals have you closed in those months? Handfuls, yeah. Everybody wants to get them off their books in that time of year. So a lot of these deals, I did zero money down. So that $2.5 million deal that we signed on the hood of the truck, zero money down. $2.5 million, zero money down. That's huge. So finding somebody that's in a major pain point and then doing those deals is awesome. So whenever I was buying these deals, I was never spending over 30. Try to move this out of the way.
Maybe try this.
Okay, is that better? So we were paying 15 to 30K per door. And we didn't have much more of an underwriting process than that, other than we were playing in this position. We were saying, okay, if we know that if we can buy for $15,000 to $20,000 a door, we can increase rents, because the rents at that particular time in this market were maximum $595. That was the top of the market, in the whole market. So we knew that if we could buy 32 units, this was the magic number.
What region was this? What city or region?
Central Missouri, yeah. So we've done a lot of deals in Central Missouri. We've done deals in other areas too, but we've done a lot of deals in Central Missouri. Around the Sedalia, Marshall, Lincoln, Cole Camp, kind of that whole Lake of the Ozarks area around Sedalia. But we knew if we could buy 32 doors and we could increase the rents by $200, that we would, every 200 times 32, we were increasing our portfolio by $1 million. It's literally as simple as that. There's no more math to it than that, okay?
What type of attrition of the renters?
Do what?
What type of attrition with the renters that when you increase the rent, they said, I'm out?
So here's the pain point that we...
Wait, you said they were $599, but you said they were vacant before.
Well, I'm talking about top of the line market rent.
Oh,
For the market, this is market rent.
Okay, that wasn't what they were getting.
Yeah, so that was market rent, right? So we can already see that, just by generalized numbers, if we didn't do anything to the properties, we bought it for $15,000 and we got $599, we're already, it's a smoking deal, right? It's already good.
That beats the 1%.
Yeah, it beats the 1% rule, which used to be, at this particular time when we were investing, everybody was buying on 2% rule. It was not the 1% rule back then. It was a 2% rule. Everybody wanted a 2% rule.
This was in the 90s?
No. This is 7, 8, 10 years ago, right? You know, Bigger Pockets was pushing 2% rule. They even have, I think they even have it on their calculator still yet, or maybe they took it off by now, but because it doesn't even exist right now, you know, and hasn't for the last 4 or 5 years. Some areas, I've seen some in Illinois, but you know, you can't collect rent there either. So, California maybe. So we went into these markets and we were putting in $5,000, $6,000, $10,000 into these units. And it was, we couldn't find anything that we would live in. And that was kind of our thought process, was like, okay, if we would live here, somebody else would live here too. And my thought process was, if they fix this up, I'd pay a couple $100 more, you know, and that's how we kind of came to this conclusion. So we started raising the rents. We went in, fixed up some of these units, and we raised rents immediately just to test the waters to $800. From this $599 mark to $800. And we leased it the same day. I was like, dang, that worked okay. Maybe it was a fluke, you know, just had somebody looking for a house. So we did another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. So over the course of that time, we did hundreds of these deals that we went from, you know, $400, $500 rents up to, our portfolio average right now is $1,054 on a portfolio average. So, and that's just by renovating the unit, fixing it up, you know, getting it out there, zero money down, you know, on the actual note. We were in a lot of construction budget money. So we took approximately $5 million in acquisition cost and turn that into about a $20 million portfolio in that particular market. You're good as a client, get it.
How'd you buy those deals, no money down? How'd you do that, Ryan?
So man, the thing is, it's really all in the seller, what the seller wants to do. You know, you gotta find the right seller that is in a pain point to do that thing. If I came to you and said, hey man, sell me your portfolio for zero money down, 30% or 30-year AM on these properties.
Kick rocks.
Like,
Go away.
right, yeah, but you're not hurt. You know, you're not 60 years old and been dealing with backed up septics and 30 years of CapEx. You never worked on the property. That should be said. Most of these people have never actually fixed the property. So you gotta know construction management a little bit, which was my background. So, you know, that helped a considerable amount, was I was able to go in and say, oh yeah, if we do this, this, and this, these things need to be done in this house, you know, and we can fix them the right way. But you gotta find the right person. It's all the person.
But what is like your sales strategy? Like, can you tell me, because I mean, when people, they summarize it, but what, if you can remember, did you say to him to get him to buy into what you were offering?
Yeah, so my biggest thing was, I would try to figure out what their disposition plan was. Like, whenever I ask people what's disposition, what's your disposition plan? Like, a lot of people just look at you and they have no idea. Half the people you talk to have never even heard of disposition, right?
Am I being sorted with some court papers or something?
The thing is, there are a lot. There are institutional investors. There are people that are meant to be investors. There are people that do this for a reason. And then there's other people out there that, especially as you get out of, you know, KC Metro and some of these super hot investor markets, you can find some of these secondary and tertiary markets where you've got a mom and pop farmer that make a bunch of money, and their CPA says, hey, you can either buy 123 Main Street or you can pay Uncle Sam. And then they mismanage the thing for 30 years. And there's more of those people out there than there are people like this in this room. A lot more. A lot more of those people. It's locating those people. And then once you find those people, most of them, it doesn't take any convincing. They're sick of it. They've had it for 30, 40 years. Like, I met a guy at a Menards meetup one day, and he was the son of some property owners, and he's like, as soon as my parents are gone, I'm getting rid of all 50 of these units. And his dad's sitting right there. I own a construction company. I started there on the construction side because I knew if I couldn't control the construction, I couldn't control the real estate.
Right.
Right? So that was where I started, because I was fixing and flipping properties. So my goal was to fix and flip 10 properties a year, and I could turn those 10 properties into 10 rental properties, and then continue to fix and flip and then grow a portfolio that way. So I started off in the construction space, so we spend a copious amount of money at Menards every year with the amount of turns that we do. So they throw a barbecue for their prime contractors every year.
So that's why I haven't been invited to the meeting.
Well, you can go. I'll invite you to the next one. Yeah, if you want to go. They're not that great. You don't really need anybody. Last year we spent about $750,000.
I'm close, right?
You're getting there. Yeah. They gave us burgers and overcooked burgers and hot dogs. Not worth the time, honestly. But
the connections.
but the connections are good, because there are a lot of rental owners there that end up spending a lot of money on these rentals. So you do meet some people like that there at these places. I've never bought anything from one of those meetups, but yeah, there are a ton of people out there that are ready to sell. They just haven't been pitched by me or any of you guys yet. But as soon as you ask them what their disposition plan is, most of them don't have a plan. They didn't have a plan going in. They don't have a plan going out.
They're not going to like real estate meetups.
No.
They're not on the internet. They're on
No.
farmers.
The only thing they're doing, they're hoping that the city doesn't send them a letter saying that they're gonna bulldoze their house. Their CPA says, hey, you can take a depreciation over 29 or 27 and a half years, and that's gonna reduce your taxable income. And if you buy 50 of these, you're good. So you're not gonna pay Uncle Sam anything. You buy another tractor today, and this year or whatever. And that's there are a lot of people out there like that. I know it sounds crazy, but that's the secret sauce, man.
This is a little bit of a tangent. I just wondered, you specialize in construction. That's where you started. Why haven't you done ground up construction?
Time's the thing. So, it takes time to build a ground up construction. I've got uncles that own a custom log home company, and I've built tons of homes with those guys, and it just takes time, right? So if I can go out and I can buy 10 or 12 deals and turn 10 or 12 deals before I can build one, the numbers are in how fast can you get them done? How fast can you get them done? We were, at one point in time before COVID-19, we were really rocking and rolling. We would package usually light to moderate remods. So we would go out and buy grandma houses or stuff like that. We call them grandma houses. Houses that are 60, 70, 80 builds. Maybe they're going to the nursing home or somebody has passed away or something like that. And it really doesn't need any construction work. It just needs paint, it needs flooring, it needs, some moderate light fixture upgrades and things like that. But it's a solid house. And you can turn those in 3 or 4 days. And we've turned a ton of those to where you go in there, you spend 3 or 4 days fixing them up, and then you make $10,000, $15,000, $25,000 doing that. And those are good, but we were turning about 10 projects a week in 16, 17, 18, 19, all the way up to 2020. So, yeah, the numbers are in volume. If you do a bunch of volume, you don't have to make $250,000 on a turn. You can accept $25K on a turn, and if it only took you a couple weeks.
So what were you spending on average on the 15K acquisition?
We had a very strict model. It was 3,000, 7,000, or 12,000. We didn't go anywhere outside of that. We did what we could do with 3,000, 7,000. We tried a 3, 5, 7 model. It didn't work. We couldn't figure out, it's too short of a gap. But 3,000, 7,000, 12,000.
This is the remodeling budget?
Remodeling budget. Yep. Yeah, because we were doing so many, you had to come up with some number and some generalized consensus as to how you were going to do that.
You talking about acquiring like portfolio. These are people that are holding multiple. You targeting portfolios and not actual.
So, I had a conversation with a couple of people in the room, earlier. It was a brief conversation, it was a one-on-one conversation. Maybe somebody's heard some things that I've talked about, in the conversation. But now I'm having a conversation with everybody. Everybody's getting the same information. That's the importance of portfolio purchase, or targeting somebody that's got 10, 20, 30, 40 houses, because Most likely, they're not all vacant. This happens sometimes. This particular person just happened to have, a couple hundred, so that wasn't really out of the normal for them to have that many vacancies.
Could somebody replicate this if they didn't have that construction management background like you?
100%, yeah. You need to know what's going on. You can't walk into a deal, and I've done a ton of consulting over the years where, especially whenever there was that huge influx of capital coming from the West Coast, and everybody, I even set up a company called Midwest Invest just for a marketing situation. I marketed this Midwest Invest, it never did $1 in revenue. It was only a thing to get people to come in because this Midwest Invest was like a target word for everybody. So there's all this influx of capital that was coming in, and they would come in and they knew nothing about how to turn a unit, how to underwrite a unit, what the market said it was worth. They just said, oh yeah, my house in Sacramento, California is worth $1.4 million. This $400,000 house over there should be good rental. You need to have a sponsor that knows what's going on there. You can't go into something, with no knowledge whatsoever. I would never expect that anybody would go in and buy 20, 30 houses on a single whack and not know how to renovate them or how to go about talking to a contractor and vetting a contractor to get them renovated.
Right.
So, yeah, and that's construction management. It's not really that hard. It's, whenever I was first learning how to do this, I was an oil and gas guy, so I knew oil and gas very well, but I really didn't know the single family house very well. And the way that I learned it was I went through my personal house with a piece of paper and I wrote down every item in my personal house about 400 times. And go over to Home Depot and I'd say, how much does it cost for 600 square foot of carpet? Okay, write that down. I spent a lot of time at the Home Depot and the lumber yards learning what those costs were. Labor's super easy. You can do a square footage method on labor. I would always call every contractor in town, I would call the biggest guy that I could find. I would say, hey, come in and bid this house for me. And then I had them do that on every single one. Even if I was gonna do it. I'd be like, hey, you might get this job. Probably not, but you might. And they'd come in anyways, just on the happenstance that they might get the job. And they would give me a labor rate. I would ask for a breakdown on that. And say, I want that itemized. So you ask for an itemized list. A lot of times I would create the itemized list and give them the itemized list or the scope of work. So you knew what you wanted done to the property. You give them the scope of work and say,
So that was your 9 and 3.
no, that was my deal. They weren't going to adhere to that budgetary. I didn't even give them that budgetary. I gave them the scope of work and said, here's the scope of work I want you to bid. And then I would go to the next contractor and say, here's the scope of work I want you to bid. Here's the scope of work I want you to bid. I'd have 3 bids on every job, and I'd make sure that, I was giving them the scope of work so there was no assumption as to what they were or were not bidding. Is a good tip as to, how to do the construction management. And some other guys in the room that have done some of these may have some tips and tricks too. That's how I would do it.
So even with the reason I ask that is because even with your background in construction management, even with providing the scopes of work, getting the 3 bids, that it is still possible that you still run into issues with
Every single job. There has never, so I've got a model that I've written over thousands and thousands and thousands of mistakes. So, and every single time that I miss something in a model, and I'm like, it didn't matter what it was. I've got this, I had a back end page on this model for a long time, a washer and dryer box. Why I forgot this on 9 properties right in a row is washer and dryer box. It's a $24 item or something. They're much more than that now. They're about $50. But I forgot this multiple times. So I made an entire page of and I just labeled it "shit I forget," and it was every time I was forgetting these things. Well, I've refined that now, to where I'm not forgetting those items. But I've created this model over many mistakes of doing this thing, and now over the last several hundred remodels that we've done, we're usually within 5%, one way or the other of where we're closing that thing out. Unless we run into some major mistakes, you know, like we've had some issues where we bought some properties that we didn't know had major foundational issues until you kind of get into them a little bit deeper that were hidden. But we have our unforeseen budget that we put into every single deal as well. So, yeah. You should always underwrite lots of contingency, especially on any rehab that's going to be over $20,000. You should keep a 15 to 20% budget.
That's what I was gonna ask, how much contingency should you have in?
Yeah, 15 to 20% if the project's over 25 grand. So that's what I found. Now lots of people have lots of different ideas on that, but yeah, right. And if it's a project that goes much over, like we've done some $150,000 projects, and if they're $150,000 projects, we'll save 35-40% sometimes on contingency. Yeah. Yeah.
That's how you don't lose your ass. It's like, okay, we accounted for it.
Yeah. Well, rule number one is don't lose money, right? You work too damn hard for it to lose it, so don't lose money.
How do you finance a lot of these deals now, like the rehabs and stuff?
So that's a great question. That's actually a really fun one. So we'll kind of go into the finance piece of that. So we do a lot of our stuff zero money down. I want to say that you don't need money to do real estate, but you know, if you're creative enough and you understand the construction management enough, there are ways to do these things zero money down. So we start out by now doing a very strict underwriting on the deal, and then we underwrite the loan and everything all into this deal. And we do what's called instead of just doing a standard appraisal, we'll do what's called an as-built appraisal. So some people in the room may be familiar with what an as-built appraisal is. But what an as-built is say we have a base cost of the house. Let's say the base cost is $50,000. Okay? So there's our base cost. We know, like we have a really quick napkin underwriting that we do first, and that we've got 4 underwritings that we do on every property. And it goes, you know, once it makes the first deal, then we'll go to the next underwriting, which is a little bit more stringent, and then the next one, which is more stringent, and then the final underwriting, which gets into the very, very nitty-gritty details of everything that's getting done with this property. So we'll say, okay, here's our base price of $50,000. You know, and these are just show numbers. You know, they may not work for KC area, but there are a lot of areas that you can still buy a house for $50K. And then we're gonna make $25K. So here's where a lot of people mess this up. A lot of people will say, oh, we're gonna do $50K, and then they're thinking about rehab, because we gotta rehab this property. So they wanna come up with a rehab budget, and then they're gonna tax that rehab budget, right? We're not attacking the rehab budget. We're gonna let the property tell us and the market tell us how much that rehab has to be, okay? So we're gonna say $50,000, and then our minimum is $25K. We're not gonna flip a house without $25,000 profit. We're taking our money first, okay?
Profit first.
Profit first. Rule number 1, don't lose money. What's rule number 2?
Don't lose money.
See rule 1. See rule 1. So $50K, this is our money, and then comes our rehab. Say our rehab's another $25K, right? And you know, we've got a contingency budget of $20K. That's a high contingency, but so, and let's say the market is gonna give us, you know, $150. And this is a conservative number. Let's say that we estimate that the market could possibly give us $175. We want to estimate lower than that. We want to estimate bottom of the market. No shit, this is what we're going to get paid. We would rather be surprised with a few extra pennies on the end than we would to come out of pocket with any money at the end of the day or lose money. So we're going to say the market's going to give us $150, and we're going to create this nice, pretty little packet. exemplifying all this. Bigger Pockets has a calculator that does this very well. Costs like $300 a year. You do one deal will pay for that calculator, I guarantee it. You can print out the pretty little PDF thing and the bankers love it. So you go in, you give that to the banker and say, banker, here's what we're gonna sell that property for. The banker's like, okay, so they're gonna give you 80% LTV. I'm not super great at the fast offhand math, but what is that? 120. 120K. I didn't know that was gonna work out like that.
That's where you're at with your contingency.
Where are we at here?
120.
How much money are we out of pocket?
He's done it so many times, he knows.
I've done that once or twice. And that's how you do a creative finance deal. Zero money out of pocket. You lock up the deal with the guy that's ready to sell it. And you can do this on singles, right? You can do this. It's best if you do it with portfolios. And the reason it's best you can do it with portfolios is you can cherry pick the deals, right? So if you buy 10 properties and you can't afford to keep all of them, maybe you can, maybe you can't. I couldn't in the beginning afford to keep all of them. So I would cherry pick the deals. I would say, okay, this is in the best area. This one's gonna be a $200,000 property someday in the future. This one's gonna be 150. I gave 30, and I always just bought by the door, right? Like, I'll give you $30,000 a door. Some of them might be 90,000, one might be 10,000, but I just averaged out $30,000 a door. And then I would go in, I would cherry pick the best properties, had the highest rent values and the highest possible disposition values. And then I would go in, I would use this strategy, zero money down with the bank financing somebody else's money. And I would flip those deals, make all of my money back, and then I've got free and clear assets that are worth a couple $100,000 at the end of the disposition period, which is 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, 50 years, whatever you decide.
How do we do that with the bank? How do we convince them to give us that loan?
So, I mean, it's as simple as creating a relationship with the bank. Asking for an as-built appraisal.
And you have a W-2.
Do what?
You had a W-2.
Yeah, at the beginning I had a W-2 job. But I'm guessing that a lot of people have a W-2 job or have some income or something like that. But you can do a couple the hard way, right? Stack some cash up. But doing those with that bank and the bank's going to get looser and looser and looser with money. Depending on the market. Right now they're a little tight, but
Yeah, 7-8% on, yeah.
that's where the owner finance is so attractive. Like, there's a lot of people out there right now that's got 3% fixed rate debt. I'm working a deal right now on 9 units. Well, you walked one the other day, right? So this guy bought some units, bought them at he's got them locked up on a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, 3.1% interest, and which is phenomenal. But he's ready to get out. And I sold him several deals, and I've actually sold one of the deals that he's got. I've sold it 3 times already, so it's kind of cool for me. But now I've got him in debt. I want to sell this thing 5 times. So anybody who's been looking for a triplex, I got one. But anyways, this guy's got a 3% note on this thing, fixed rate for 30 years, and he wants out. And I was like, hey man, owner finance this thing to me at 5.5. He says, okay, you can't go and get a 5.5% loan at the bank right now.
Yeah.
I already managed the thing, so I already know what it's doing.
So you could wrap it. 8.
I mean, it's and it's pretty nice unit, eh?
Yeah.
You walked it, so, and that's one of the 9, and they all look like that, but, we went in there day one, the 2 of the units were vacant, and, so, he had a really, we managed the unit for a couple of years, and then we let go a lot of our single family operator, people on our property management side to make room for our real estate fund. So he was one of those guys. He went to another property management company. He had out of the 9, he had 4 or 5 vacant units in that portfolio. So it wasn't making any money. It was just supporting the mortgage, and then he had a couple capital events that ended up happening that cost him about $30,000. That's a really good situation to look out for. That guy's now in a pain point. Really great asset. He's in a really great mortgage. a lot of times the mortgage is worth more than the property is. So the debt means everything on these deals. I was looking this morning, there's about 100, I think it's 186 billion with a B, $billion worth of debt that's coming to renew in 2023, about 204 billion in 2024. So there's no lack of deals out there. It's just how much are you gonna hustle for?
I can tell about that triplex I did as built last year.
Do it, man.
So I bought a triplex last year, and I didn't even know what I was doing at the time. This is like my fourth deal, but I did this as-built thing. I didn't even know what I was doing. So this triplex was in Smithville. This is on the street that I go down like every day. There's a for rent sign, and I called it. It's like, hey, what's it rent for? She's renting this thing for like $400 a month, and it should rent for like $700 a month. So I'm like, would you sell this to me? And she's like, yeah, I'd sell it. Come look at it tomorrow. And so I went in and looked at it and locked it up right there on a one-page napkin contract for $140,000 for this triplex. I thought it was worth about $200,000 at the time because it would rent for $700 a unit, $2,100. And so the problem was it didn't have, which I came to find, it was studio apartments. They're like really small, 450 a door or 450 square foot per unit. And she had like two of them. She was renting for $400 a month, and then one of the gals wasn't paying, and then one of them was paying, right? So she's just like, and she's like 80 years old, you know, kind of like the guys that he's working with, right? It's just, you know, and these older folks that have these real estate, like that was the only place she owned. She's just like how many, you know, payments of $700 a month is she gonna get to get $140,000, right? Like that's a long time, you know. And she just, they can't see any farther than where they're at right now, right? So they're like, I'll sell it. And so, you know, she was real cool. She could tell I knew what I was doing. So I went and, you know, wanted to buy it for 140. I knew it was worth, you know, probably 200 just as it sat, right? But then I found it needed kitchens because it was a commercial property, but she'd been rented as residential for like 20 years. And so I went to the bank, just like Central Bank, and I was like, hey, I want to buy this. I'll put 20% down. And, you know, they wouldn't give me the loan, but they would give it to me as completed because it has to have kitchens to be a proper residential property. So it's like, no problem. So I got bids like, you know, he does, and got a few bids and had my contractor, you know, he's gonna install kitchens for $7,000. So they gave me, I got it closed and got an as completed appraisal for $187,000 as completed, right? So I put 20 grand down, which is like, of 140, that's like, it's like $27,000 or $28,000 down. I think it was 20%. So I put the money down and got the kitchens done in like 2 weeks, okay? And then now I've got like a lot of equity because I bought it for 142 and it's now worth 187. So I've got like, you know, what's that, like 45,000 in equity, right? Like in 2 weeks. And so I went back to the bank and I was like, hey, you know, it's done. It's now worth 187. I got a loan for like 112 or whatever it is, and I was like, can you guys give me a line of credit for $35,000, which is all the money I had into it? And they're like, yeah. And so like within the span of 3 or 4 weeks, I closed on this place and had a line of credit for all the cash that I put in it. So there's no money out of pocket, right? And that's what you can do with like an as completed appraisal is, you know, go in and pitch this thing, because that was the whole plan. I knew I had to put in kitchens because I had to get it done. You do the same thing with like what he's doing, you know, or these any kind of renovation is, you know, pitch the finished product and reverse engineer from there, and then you could potentially be no money out of pocket in the deal, you know, after a very short period of time.
There's a bit of a twist to that too, Daniel.
Tell me about it.
So there is a bit of a twist to that. Like, remember, we took our money here. Where was that money set? That was in the note. And just to be 100% clear, how I typically do this deal is a lot of times I'm paying cash for this deal. So I would go out and I buy this deal cash.
Yeah.
You know, I close the deal cash and I take it to the bank, and then I'm doing the as-built appraisal. So you can do it without doing that. It's just a little bit more difficult. You know, usually it's going to happen the way that you're describing there, whereas you're coming back later for that money. But if you have enough cash that you can wrap that deal up, you know, close the deal, tie the deal up, put the package together, and then take the deal to the bank and say, we want an as-built on it. And now you're taking, we would put this all in a line of credit. And we would spend as little money on that line of credit as physically possible until we have a contract. As soon as we sign that contract, to sell, now we're taking out the full 80% LTV, taking all of our money out of the deal, so it lightens the capital gain load. So you do have to, flips the number one pain point in flips is capital gains. They're also called capital pains. So that tax liability can be pretty stringent, especially if you're flipping a whole bunch. But you guys start flipping 100 a year, call me, I'll tell you what to do. We got some money, we'll put your money into syndication somewhere or something. I just wanted to kind of point that part out. I almost had to evict her, by the way. She was a perfectly paying tenant, but her income didn't allow for her to spend any more money. And her unit, she'd been living there for 18 years. So, and you can't renovate a house with somebody that's lived there for 18 years because they inevitably pile some crap up in the house, right? So it does happen, and I bought deals that just need no renovation whatsoever. But it's, our focus was value add, right? Our focus was buying a deal that needed some CapEx money put into it on the single family side. Now, we have a different strategy in our real estate syndication company that's a little bit different focus than that. These are light value add or just rent increases. So, on that side, yeah, there's a lot, especially you mentioned commercial side, and the commercial side, a lot of these deals right now, especially, a property that's less than 10 years old, these really don't need any renovations. You can come in there and they're just management defaults, right? So you can fix some management stuff, tweak some management stuff, maybe raise some rents a little bit and really just stabilize the property. And that gives you a lot of value there too. But, that's a lot longer play than kind of what we've been going over tonight.
So when it was something that's management, are you syndicating those, or did you ever find those seller finance deals?
Well, yeah, seller finance, tons of mismanagement. It's probably 80 to 90% mismanagement in that. But with that mismanagement's happened for 20, 30 years, so that comes with capital issues. That comes with CapEx, major CapEx issues. Most of these you're putting roofs on, you're redoing the entire unit. So not so much in that area. You're almost, I would say that the ratio is probably 98%. You're going to remodel the thing, in my experience. Now there are some grandma houses out there that it's very minimal or none. You can almost hire a carpet guy, from a flooring company and a painter to go in and turn those. So
I have an investor that's looking at like a 10-unit hotel, like in the Southwest, and the owner is like 80 years old. Rooms are renting for like $65 a night. He's not on the internet. The motel signs still say like color TVs, phone in the room.
this is what we're looking
And literally, the investor sent me some pictures. The TVs are still knob fucking TVs. They were like brand new when this guy bought it, like in his 20s. So like they're in negotiations to acquire the property and then have me manage it as a short-term rental.
that was just a bragging point. This is a perfect style of deal. That's the type of deals you're looking for. But the thing is, you're not going to go out there. People think that I've got where I've got, or other people that do this thing, that we make it look easy. But what they don't realize, I was an oil and gas guy. I worked 7 days a week, 80 to 90 hour weeks. So whenever I parlayed from doing that, I never changed my schedule. I actually went overboard. I was working 7 days a week, 16, 18 hours a day, running deals, finding those people, chasing them down, talking to contractors, getting vendors, figuring all this stuff out. So, it takes a lot of time. There is a ton of time commitment in this game. It is not a get rich quick. It is not a slow play. It is a long game. It's a long game, and it takes a lot of hours. So don't think you're going to go out there and talk to 4 owners and knock down a 35-unit deal. It might happen. You might get lucky. But, we were underwriting 100 to 1. on the buy.
Just by one deal out of 100.
One deal out of 100 we were purchasing.
Right.
That was our ratio in the beginning. Now, once we started figuring out what we were really looking for, it got better. But in the first couple of years, we were underwriting 101. Well, a couple of reasons. We were scared of how much money we were going to spend. So that was part of it. And then the second thing was we didn't know what the heck we were looking at. I passed on tons of deals that today I would be like, oh yeah, we're doing that, 100%. But it's not a quick thing. So, any more questions out there? Nothing.
What's the size of your syndications fund?
So we can't talk really, I guess, publicly about that. No. So yeah,
General.
Yeah. So generally we do real estate syndications. We buy apartment complexes and we syndicate with other investors and buy bigger deals than what anybody could have bought by themselves. Typical buy-ins on those are ranging anywhere from about 50,000 to 100,000. And our average investor probably is in 250 range on average. Awesome.
Give it up for Bryant Dawson. Let's go, England Capital. Hey! Yeah, scan the code, guys. Look him up. A lot of great resources, and if you want to get into a fund, I've talked to him a lot. He knows what he's doing. My dad's invested in some limited funds with his business, and it seems like Brian's really learned from a lot of the good people and is doing a lot of the good stuff himself. I would definitely recommend him. I've done it, but just from what I've heard, it sounds very competent. And then, so thanks for guys for coming. Feel free to network. We have a last call. I got $200 more to spend in this place that you guys need to drink up. All right, so go get you guys some drinks. Let's party all night and until 9 o'clock when they kick us out. All right, go talk to Brian about anything with his real estate or getting into his fund, anything like that, guys. Let's roll.